Take a second and imagine you are an athlete. You have been training in your favorite sport for a long time. You have been doing a lot of effort. You've been working and training day and night to be in shape and to maybe represent your country in big events. The day comes and you get a chance to do just that. But when you go there to participate in that international event, you find yourself in the middle of a big crisis. You are not a hero to your country. You are actually a traitor. This is not an imaginary story. This is actually the story of 23 women from Iran who went to Australia to participate in a football championship just to find themselves in the middle of a huge international crisis. Hello everyone, this is WooEnglish and this is a channel dedicated to learning English in a very simple way. We teach you English through stories. We believe that's a natural way to learn English in a meaningful and real context. The story is B2, which means that for B1 learners, the story might be a little bit challenging. So that does not mean that you will not benefit from it. It will be challenging, but you will be learning new words and new vocabulary. For B2 learners, of course, the story is just right for you. It will push you a little bit above your level. And if you are advanced or maybe above B2, that means that the story will be comfortable, but it still will be beneficial for you. To learn the maximum from this story, we recommend always three things. First, listen to the story for a first time without doing anything. Just listen to it and familiarize yourself with it. For the second time, listen to the story again and this time write some new words or some vocabulary that you are seeing for the first time. For the third listening, listen to the story and try to do the quiz that we will leave in the first comment under this video. If you are new to the channel, before you go to the video, make sure to subscribe. You will not regret it. This will be one of the greatest things you will do today. If you have already subscribed to the channel, of course, make sure to drop a like, click that thumbs up. That helps the video be recommended and get recommended to other people who will really need it. And of course, if you know someone who is learning English, make sure to recommend this channel for them. So without further ado, let's go to our first listening.
Chapter 1. The Last Normal Day. The Gold Coast is one of the most beautiful places on Earth. The sky is wide and blue. The beaches stretch for kilometers. The air smells like salt and sunscreen. In early March, the temperature sits around 28 degrees. People walk slowly here. They carry coffee cups and surfboards. Nobody is in a hurry. This is where the Iran women's national football team arrived to play in the 2026 AFC Women's Asian Cup. They call themselves the Lionesses. They came to play football. The tournament had 12 teams. It was a serious competition. The best women's football teams in Asia. Australia was the host. South Korea, Japan, China, the Philippines, all of them were there. For the Iranian players, this was a rare opportunity, a chance to compete at the highest level, a chance to play on international television, a chance to be seen. The team had prepared for months. Their head coach, Marzia Jafari, had worked with the players through qualifiers, through training camps, through long months of preparation. The squad had 26 players. Some of them had never left Iran before. Some of them had been playing football since they were children, in a country where women's football was not always supported, not always easy, not always safe. To be here, in Australia, in the sunshine, on a proper international stage, was not a small thing, But something was wrong from the moment they landed. Not with the Gold Coast. The Gold Coast was perfect. What was wrong was 11,000 kilometers away. Since December 2025, Iran had been shaking. Protests had started across the country, in Tehran, in Isfahan, in small cities and large ones. People were angry about the economy. The Iranian rial had collapsed. Prices were rising every week. Basic goods were disappearing from the shelves. Families were struggling, and the government's response was not negotiation. It was not reform. It was force. By the time the Iranian team boarded their flight to Australia, the situation at home had become something much darker than a protest. Human rights organizations were reporting thousands of deaths. Thousands of people, ordinary people, not soldiers, killed in the streets of their own cities. The players knew this. Their families were still there. On February 28, 2026, while the Iranian team was already in Australia, preparing for their first match, the news changed again. The United States and Israel launched military strikes on Iran. In the first hours of the attack, Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, was killed. So were dozens of other officials. So were students inside a girls' elementary school in the city of Minab. Iran was now at war. The tournament was scheduled to begin on March 1st. The Iranian team's first match was on March 2nd, against South Korea at Gold Coast Stadium. What do you do with information like that? You are a footballer. You are in Queensland, Australia. Outside your hotel window, the sky is the same blue it was yesterday. The beach is still there. People are still walking slowly with their coffee cups. But your country is on fire. Your family is inside that fire. And in 2 days, you have to walk out onto a football pitch, stand in a line, and perform. Coach Marzieh Jafari spoke to journalists before the tournament began. She was careful with her words. Obviously, we have so much concern regarding the health of our families and our loved ones, she said. But here, we are coming to play football professionally. The cameras filmed the team arriving at the stadium for their first training session. The players wore their training kits. They walked in a group. They carried their bags. They looked like a football team. They looked like women who had not slept. Gold Coast Stadium holds 27,000 people. On a clear day, you can see the mountains from one side and the ocean from the other. On the evening of March 2nd, 2026, the Iran women's national football team walked out of the tunnel and onto the pitch for their opening match against South Korea. The stadium announcer introduced both teams. The South Korean anthem played first. Then it was Iran's turn. The music started. Chapter 2. 48 seconds of silence. The Iranian national anthem lasts 48 seconds. Most people have never counted them. On the evening of March 2nd, 2026, in a stadium on the Gold Coast in Queensland, Australia, 48 seconds became a very long time. The two teams walked out of the tunnel. 23 Iranian players in white. 23 South Korean players in red. The stadium held 27,000 people. Many of them were members of the Iranian diaspora. They had come from Brisbane, from Sydney, from Melbourne. Some of them were holding flags. Not the green, white, and red flag of the Islamic Republic of Iran. The older flag. The flag from before 1979. The lion and the sun. They held it quietly. They did not shout. They waited. The stadium announcer asked everyone to stand for the national anthems. The South Korean anthem played first. The South Korean players sang. The crowd listened. Then the music changed. The opening notes of the Iranian anthem filled the stadium. The Iranian players stood in a line, shoulders straight, eyes forward, hands at their sides. The music played. Nobody sang. Not one player moved her lips. Not one player looked at another. They stood completely still. The anthem has words about struggle and revolution. It has words about the Islamic Republic. It has words that, on that particular night, in that particular stadium, with their country burning behind them, these women chose not to say. They did not protest loudly. They did not raise their fists. They did not turn their backs. They simply stood and said nothing. 48 seconds. The cameras were on their faces the entire time. Some of the players blinked. Some of them swallowed. One of them had her jaw set very tight. Not one of them sang. In the crowd, some people began to cry. Others held their flags higher. Nobody who was watching in that stadium, and nobody watching on television screens across Australia, across Europe, across North America, across Iran itself, on the phones and laptops of people who had found a way through the internet blackouts. Nobody needed an explanation. The silence was the explanation. After the anthem ended, the match began. Iran lost 3-0 to South Korea. After the final whistle, the journalists gathered. They had questions, not about the football. Coach Marzieh Jafari stood at the microphone. She was careful. She was very careful. Obviously, we have so much concern regarding the health of our families and our loved ones, she said. All other Iranian people inside our country, which we are fully disconnected with. She paused. But here, we are coming to play football professionally. She did not mention the anthem. She did not mention the war. She did not mention the supreme leader who had been killed 2 days earlier. She answered the football questions. She thanked the journalists. She walked away from the microphone. That night, the video of the anthem spread across the internet. Not just in Australia. Not just in the Iranian diaspora communities around the world. Inside Iran, too, on phones passed between people, on apps that required a VPN, in houses where the television was turned down low, people watched 23 women stand in silence for 48 seconds. In Tehran, in the studios of state television, other people were watching the same video. They were not crying. They were not moved. They were writing. The word they reached for was not protest. It was not silence. It was not grief. The word they reached for was much older, much more dangerous. A word that, under the laws of wartime Iran, carries only one possible punishment. They had not used that word yet, but they were about to.
Before we go to chapter 3, we have a little challenge for you. As you listen, try to find a word that has the same meaning as fast. If you find it, drop it in the comment section. And of course, if you haven't yet, make sure to like this video.
Chapter 3, Traitors. The video was 12 seconds long. 12 seconds of 23 women standing in silence. By midnight on the 2nd of March, 2026, it had been watched millions of times. Inside Iran, the internet was partially blocked. The government had cut access during the protests. During the war, the cuts went deeper. But the video moved anyway. Through VPNs, through encrypted messages, through phones passed from hand to hand. Some people watched it and wept. Some people watched it and smiled. Some people watched it and understood immediately what was about to happen to these women. Iranian state television did not wait long. A presenter named Mohammad Reza Shahbazi appeared on screen. He looked at the camera. He said the players were traitors. He said they must be dealt with more severely. He did not say this quietly. He did not frame it as an opinion. He said it the way a state broadcaster says something when the state has already decided. The word traitor in Iran is not just an insult. It is a legal category. Under Iranian law, treason is a crime. Under Iranian wartime law, treason is a capital crime. Capital means death. The presenter knew this. His audience knew this. And somewhere in a hotel on the Gold Coast in Queensland, Australia, the players knew this too. The Football Federation of the Islamic Republic of Iran moved quickly. Officials called the silence a political act against the state. State media called it an act of betrayal against the nation. One broadcaster stated explicitly that the designation of traitor was punishable by death, not punishable by a ban, not punishable by a fine, not punishable by suspension from football. Death. The reaction spread beyond television. On social media, hardline accounts published the players' names. Some published their photographs. Some published the names of their families. Human rights organizations outside Iran began issuing warnings. FIFPro, the global organization representing professional footballers, urged FIFA and the AFC to take immediate action to protect the players. The Refugee Council of Australia issued a statement. Chief Executive Paul Power said the women appeared to be at risk if returned to Iran. In the past, he said, quite simple acts of peaceful protest have suffered dire consequences. Inside the team hotel on the Gold Coast, the situation changed. Sources close to the team told CNN Sports that Iranian security officials accompanying the delegation tightened their control over the players. One man with the delegation was believed to be affiliated with Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. The players were monitored. Their movements were watched. Their communications were watched. They were not free to speak to the media. They were not free to speak to each other without being observed. They were not free. 3 days after the silence, Iran played their second match. The opponent was Australia, the host nation. The crowd was large. The cameras were everywhere. Before the match, the Iranian anthem played again. This time, the players sang. They sang and they saluted. Sources told CNN Sports they had been forced. Threats had been made against their families in Iran. Their families, mothers, fathers, sisters, brothers, still inside a country at war, still reachable, still vulnerable. Iran forward Sara Didar stood in front of a microphone before the match. She choked up. Her voice broke. "Obviously, we're all concerned," she said. "We're sad at what has happened to Iran and our families in Iran." She did not say more than that. She could not say more than that. Australia won the match 4-0. The score line did not matter. What mattered was what the world had just watched. 23 women who had stood in silence 3 days earlier were now standing at attention, singing the anthem of the government that had called them traitors in front of cameras broadcasting to every country on earth. The Iranian government called it a correction. The Iranian government called it loyalty. Human rights observers called it something else. They called it a warning about what was waiting for these women the moment they boarded a plane back to Tehran. Iran's final group match was on March 8th. Against the Philippines, Iran lost 2-0. The result confirmed their elimination from the tournament. After the final whistle, the team returned to their hotel. Their bags were packed. Their flight was being arranged. The delegation minders began preparing the schedule for departure. Outside the hotel, something was also being prepared. A crowd was gathering. They were carrying signs. The signs said 4 words: "Save our girls." Chapter 4. Hands on Glass. The 8th of March, 2026, the last match was over. Iran had lost 2-0 to the Philippines. The tournament was finished. It was time to go home. The team bus was scheduled to leave the hotel on the Gold Coast. The route was simple. Hotel to airport, airport to Sydney, Sydney to Kuala Lumpur, Kuala Lumpur toward Tehran. A straight line from Australia back to Iran, back to the war, back to the government that had called them traitors, back to a country where wartime treason carries one punishment. The bus was waiting. The engine was running. The delegation minders were ready. But outside the hotel, something had changed. The crowd had been growing for hours. Dozens of people, members of the Iranian diaspora, Australians, journalists, human rights observers, had gathered on the street outside the team hotel. They were not quiet. They were not passive. They were holding signs. 4 words: "Save our girls." They chanted it together, over and over, in English, in Farsi, in both. Some of them were crying. Some of them were shouting at the police. Some of them were on their phones, live streaming to thousands of people watching from other cities, other countries, other time zones. They all wanted the same thing. They wanted the bus to stop. The players came out of the hotel. Cameras filmed what happened next. One player was seen being led to the bus by her wrist. A teammate held her wrist and walked her forward. The player's head was down. She did not look up. According to witnesses, one player was grabbed by her collar and the back of her shirt, pulled toward the bus. The crowd saw this. The crowd reacted. The chanting got louder. Save our girls. Save our girls. Save our girls. The bus began to move. The crowd moved with it. People stepped in front of the vehicle. The bus slowed. It did not stop, but it slowed. For a moment, the bus and the crowd were the same thing. A mass of people and metal, barely moving, on a street in Queensland on a Tuesday evening. Then the bus pushed through. And that is when people saw the hands. Through the windows of the bus, players were visible. Some of them were pressing their hands against the glass. Others were making signals. Hadi Karimi, a human rights advocate and member of the local Iranian community, was standing outside. He said he could clearly see at least 3 players inside making the international hand signal for help, the signal for SOS. 3 dots, 3 dashes, 3 dots, made with fingers against a bus window, on a Tuesday evening, on the Gold Coast, in Australia, where the sky is wide and blue, where people walk slowly, where nobody is supposed to be in danger. The video spread within minutes. Not hours, minutes. People watching the live streams saw it in real time. People in Sydney saw it. People in London saw it. People in Tehran, on their phones, through VPNs, in darkened rooms, saw it. There was immediate debate about whether the signals were intentional. One source close to the team expressed skepticism to CNN that the players would know what the SOS signal represents. But Karimi had no doubt about what he saw, and the crowd outside the hotel had no doubt. And the thousands of people watching the live stream had no doubt. Inside the bus, according to one observer, at least one player was in tears. The bus did not stop. It drove to the airport. At the airport in Sydney, the team checked in for their international flight to Kuala Lumpur. The delegation moved through security. The minders stayed close. The players stayed together. 2 members of the group, player Mohadise Zolfi and staff member Zahra Sultan Meshke Kar, did not board the plane. They stopped at the gate, and they asked for help. The rest of the group flew to Malaysia. The plane lifted into the Australian night. Below them, the Gold Coast was lit up along the edge of the ocean. The beaches were dark. The stadium was empty. The signs that said, "Save our girls," were still in people's hands. In Brisbane, Australian government officials were already making phone calls. In Washington, a man was opening his phone. And somewhere in Queensland, in the middle of the night, 5 women who had played football for their country were sitting in a room deciding what to do next. Chapter 5. The Safe House. The night of March 9th, 2026 moved fast. Very fast. 5 players left the team's training camp in Queensland before dawn. Their names were confirmed by Australian officials and reported by multiple international news organizations. Zahra Ganbari, the captain. Iran's all-time top scorer in women's football. Fatime Pasandide, Zahra Sarbali, Atefe Ramezanizadeh, Mona Hamoudi. 5 women, 5 decisions. One night. They did not make a speech. They did not call a press conference. They did not post anything on social media. They simply left. Australian government officials had been preparing for this possibility before the tournament began. Security checks had been conducted. Protocols had been established. The stakes had risen considerably after the U.S. and Israel attacked Iran on February 28th, turning a football tournament into something no one had planned for. When the 5 players came forward, the system was ready. Australian Federal Police took them to an undisclosed location in Brisbane, a safe house. The address was not made public. The exact location was not made public. Nothing about where they were was made public. That was the point. On Monday, 9th March, Australian Home Affairs Minister Tony Burke confirmed that 5 players had been granted humanitarian visas. He stood in front of cameras and spoke carefully. The Australian government, he said, had been working on this for some time. The offer of asylum, he said, had been extended to other members of the team as well. We're willing to provide assistance to other women in the team, he said. We say to them, if you want our help, help is here, and we will provide that. On the same day, President Donald Trump posted on Truth Social. He called it a terrible humanitarian mistake if Australia allowed the team to return to Iran. He said the United States would grant the Iranian players asylum if Australia did not. He later posted again. He said he had spoken to Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese by phone. He said 5 players had already been taken care of. Albanese confirmed the call. He confirmed the visas. He confirmed the women had been moved to a safe location. Within hours of the announcement, Brisbane Roar Football Club posted on social media. They invited the women to train at their facilities. A professional football club in the city where the women were hiding, offering them a place to belong. But the story was not finished. 2 more members of the delegation came forward on Tuesday. Player Mohadase Zolfi, who had stopped at the gate at Sydney Airport the night before, formally applied for asylum. Staff member Zahra Sultan Meshke Kar did the same. Australian officials confirmed their applications. By Tuesday night, all 7 were together. 7 women, 1 undisclosed location. Australian Federal Police outside the door. Then something went wrong. One of the 7 changed her mind. She had spoken to teammates who had already left the country. She had spoken to the coach. They advised her to contact the Iranian embassy. She did. She told them where everyone was. Home Affairs Minister Tony Burke stood up in Parliament and told the country what had happened. He did not name the woman. He said he immediately gave the instruction for the others to be moved. Unfortunately, in making that decision, he said, she'd been advised by her teammates and coach to contact the Iranian embassy and to get collected. Australian Federal Police moved the remaining 6 women to a new location before Iranian officials could act on the information. The safe house was no longer safe. There was a new safe house now. The address was not made public. The exact location was not made public. Nothing about where they were was made public. The Iranian Football Federation president, Mehdi Taj, appeared on camera. He said the players had been kidnapped. He said Australia had taken them hostage. He said the episode cast doubt on Iran's participation in the 2026 FIFA World Cup. The Australian government did not use the word kidnapped. The Australian government used the word choice. Outside the players' hotel on the Gold Coast, earlier that week, a reporter had watched the team bus leave. She described what she saw through the window. One of the women inside was in tears. Another had her head bowed. The bus had moved through the crowd and driven away. But 6 of the women on that bus were now in a room in Brisbane under police protection. They had made their choice. They were safe. For now. Chapter 6. Come Home. The safe house was quiet. Outside, Brisbane continued. Cars moved through the streets. People went to work. The sky was the same blue it had always been. Inside, 6 women waited. Waiting is its own kind of pressure. There were no cameras in the safe house. There were no journalists. There were no officials with microphones. There was just time. And everything that comes with time. Thoughts, memories, voices. The voices came through phones. Australian officials had arranged for the women to make calls to their families in Iran. The calls happened in Sydney before the team flew out. Officials sat with interpreters. They made sure the women could speak privately. They made sure no Iranian minders were present. But private does not mean easy. A phone call home from a safe house in Brisbane to a family in a country at war is not a simple thing. On one end of the line, a daughter in Australia. On the other end, a mother in Iran. What was said in those calls was not recorded. What was said was not reported. But the calls happened. And after the calls, some of the women changed their minds. The Iranian government did not stay silent. Iran's first vice president, Mohammad Reza Aref, appeared on television. He said the players had been subjected to psychological pressure while in Australia. He said Iran welcomed its children with open arms. He said their security would be guaranteed. Iran's foreign ministry spokesperson wrote on social media, "To Iran's women's football team," he wrote, "don't worry. Iran awaits you with open arms." Iran's General Prosecutor's Office issued a statement. The players, it said, were invited to return home with peace and confidence. The mother of Zara Ganbari, the captain, Iran's all-time top scorer, was visited by Iranian security. Iran International reported that agents from the intelligence unit of the Revolutionary Guards contacted her directly. The mother was in Iran. Her daughter was in Brisbane. What the agents said to her was not fully reported. What she said to her daughter on the phone was not reported. But on March 15th, Zara Ganbari withdrew her application for asylum. 3 others had gone before her. On March 14th, Mona Hamoudi, Zara Sarbali, and a member of the technical staff withdrew their applications. Iranian state media posted a photograph of them apparently boarding a plane. Tasnim news agency said they were returning to the warm embrace of their family and homeland. A fifth player withdrew shortly after. Australian Home Affairs Minister Tony Burke issued a statement. He said the Australian government had done everything it could to present the women with genuine choices. We can ensure that opportunities are provided and communicated, he said. We cannot remove the context in which the players are making these incredibly difficult decisions. He did not say they were wrong. He did not say they were right. He said the decisions were theirs. The women who chose to return did not give interviews. They did not explain their decision publicly. They did not post on social media. They did not speak to journalists. They got on a plane. The plane flew from Australia to Malaysia. From Malaysia, the delegation traveled toward Oman. From Oman, they planned to cross into Iran through Turkey. On the 18th of March, members of the Iranian women's football team were photographed arriving at the Gerbalak border crossing on the Turkish-Iranian border. They were traveling by bus. They were carrying their bags. They were going home. In Tehran, there were people waiting for them. Iranian state media covered the return. There were cameras at the crossing. There were officials. There was a welcome. The government called it a homecoming. The government called it a victory. In Brisbane, 2 women did not watch the coverage. They were somewhere else, in a safe location, under the protection of the Australian government. They had made a different decision. Not a louder decision, not a braver decision, a different one. Kylie Moore Gilbert is a political scientist at Macquarie University in Sydney. She spent more than 2 years in Iranian prisons on spying charges from 2018 to 2020. She knows something about decisions made under pressure. She spoke to the Australian Broadcasting Corporation about what had happened. The high stakes, she said, made the Iranian regime sit up and pay attention and try to force their hand. She did not call the women who returned cowards. She did not call the women who stayed heroes. She said the situation had become something no one had planned for, and that inside that situation, each woman had made the best decision she could. By the 3rd week of March, the story had mostly left the front pages. The war continued. The protests continued. The world moved to the next thing. In Brisbane, 2 women remained. In Tehran, the others had arrived. The cameras had stopped following all of them. Chapter 7. 2 Women, 1 New City. 16th of March, 2026. A football pitch in Brisbane. Morning light. Fatemeh Pasandideh and Atefe Ramezanizadeh walked onto the training ground of Brisbane Roar Football Club. They were wearing orange, the club's colours. Brisbane Roar plays in Australia's A-League Women, a professional competition. Real matches, real crowds, real football. The club had offered them a place to train the week before. The offer was public. It was posted on social media. A place to train, play, and belong, the club wrote. The women had accepted. The training session was not filmed in detail. No interviews were given. No statements were made. What was documented was a photograph. two women in orange jerseys, standing with the Brisbane Roar women's squad, smiling. The club posted it to Instagram. The caption was simple. It welcomed Fateme and Atefe. Atefe Ramezanizadeh left a comment on the post. "Thank you for everything," she wrote. Fateme Pasandide posted separately a photograph of herself with FIFA's chief football officer, Jill Ellis. She wrote 4 words over the image. "Everything will be fine." That was all. No press conference, no television interview, no statement about Iran, no statement about the war, no statement about what they had left behind. 2 women, 1 football pitch, 1 photograph, 4 words. On the same day, the rest of the Iranian women's football team was traveling from Malaysia toward Oman, toward the Turkish border, toward home. 2 groups of women, once teammates, now on opposite sides of the earth. Both groups moving, both groups carrying the same weeks behind them. The GoFundMe campaign that had been launched to help the women rebuild their lives in Australia was still collecting donations. The Brisbane Roar CEO, Kaz Patafta, issued a short statement. "We remain committed," she wrote, "to providing a supportive environment for them whilst they navigate the next stages." The next stages. Nobody named what those stages were. Nobody could. Fateme Pasandide had never played professional football outside Iran. Atefe Ramezanizadeh had never played professional football outside Iran. Now they were training with a professional club. In a city they did not know 3 weeks ago. In a country they had come to for a football tournament. In a life that had not been planned. The photograph on Instagram got thousands of likes. People from the Iranian diaspora commented. People from Australia commented. People from countries that had followed the story for 2 weeks commented. Then the algorithm moved on. The photograph stayed. The women stayed. The world moved to the next thing. Somewhere in Tehran, the women who returned were with their families. The cameras were not there. The journalists were not there. What happened when they arrived home was not reported in detail. What was said to them, what was asked of them, what came next for them. None of that was on camera. None of that was public. This is where the story ends. Not with an answer, not with a verdict, not with a lesson. 2 women on a football pitch in Brisbane in orange jerseys. A photograph on Instagram. 4 words, everything will be fine. And somewhere, on the other side of the world, 21 other women who stood in the same silence, wore the same jersey, and made a different choice, are living lives the camera no longer follows.
And with this, we come to the end of the story of the Iranian football team, of course for women, a story that had received a lot of attention from the world. This is the entire story. You heard it. You probably learned some English from it. And now we would love for you to share with us your own opinion about this story in the comment section. Of course, make sure to also try to solve the quiz that we leave for you in the comment section. And before you go, if you haven't yet, make sure to like this video. If you haven't subscribed yet, make sure to subscribe. You don't want to miss our next stories. this is it for today. Thank you so much for watching and see you in the next video and another story.